The press conference started like any other post-game interview. Caitlin Clark sat at the podium still catching her breath after another electrifying performance that had fans on their feet and social media buzzing with highlights of her 28-12-assist masterpiece against the Las Vegas Aces. The usual questions came first about her shooting percentage, team chemistry and playoff aspirations. Beat reporters from the Indianapolis Star and ESPN fired off predictable inquiries about pick-and-roll execution and defensive schemes, but then Stephen A. Smith raised his hand from the front row, and what happened next would leave the rookie sensation completely speechless, and spark conversations across the basketball world about respect, perseverance, and the power of unexpected accountability in sports journalism. The setting post-game press conference. The Indiana Fever had just secured a crucial 94-87 victory against the Las Vegas Aces at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, with Caitlin Clark delivering what many analysts were calling her most complete professional performance to date. Her stat line read like a video game: 28 points on 11 of 18 shooting, including 6 of 10 from three-point range, 12 assists, 5 rebounds, and just 2 turnovers in 38 minutes of action. The victory moved Indiana into playoff position with just weeks remaining in the regular season. The press room buzzed with the familiar energy of post-game interviews, cameras clicking and reporters scribbling notes as Clark fielded questions with her characteristic poise and competitive fire. ESPN's Holly Rowe had just finished asking about Clark's developing chemistry with teammate Elia Boston, particularly their connection on the pick and roll that had torched Las Vegas for 18 points in the paint. The trust is really building. Clark had responded with a smile. Aaliyah has been patient with me as I learned the timing at this level tonight. Felt like we were reading each other's minds out there. That's when Stephen A. Smith, who was covering the game for a special ESPN feature on rookie impact players, caught Clark's attention from the front row. Smith had been uncharacteristically quiet during the 15-minute press conference, which was unusual for the outspoken commentator known for his passionate takes on First Take and his larger-than-life personality that dominated sports talk television. Stephen A. "Go ahead," Clark said, pointing to the veteran media personality who had covered everyone from Michael Jordan to LeBron James throughout his decades-long career. The unexpected question. Smith stood up slowly, setting aside his usual theatrical demeanor and animated gestures that had made him one of the most recognizable faces in sports media. His expression was unusually serious, almost contemplative, as he began speaking in a tone that immediately shifted the energy in the room from routine post-game analysis to something far more significant. "Caitlin, I've been in this business for over 30 years and I've interviewed thousands of athletes across every major sport. I've covered championship teams and last-place franchises, Hall of Famers and bench players, rookies who exceeded expectations and veterans who fell short of them. But I need to ask you something that's been weighing heavily on my mind since I started following your career closely this season." The room fell silent with an almost eerie stillness. Other reporters stopped typing mid-sentence. Camera operators leaned in closer. Even the Fever's media relations staff, who had been preparing to wrap up the session, froze in their positions near the back wall. "You know, I've built my career on being critical of players when I think they deserve it. It's part of what I do. It's part of my brand. It's how I've made my living for 3 decades. I don't apologize for holding athletes accountable or for having high standards, but watching you this season, seeing how you handled the pressure, the criticism, the expectations, the transition from college superstar to professional rookie, learning a new level of basketball." He paused, running his hand over his face in a gesture that seemed genuinely emotional rather than performative. "There's something I need to say publicly that I should have said months ago, and frankly something I need to apologize for. The question is this: how do you continue to show such remarkable grace and professionalism when people like me in the media, and I'm specifically talking about myself here, have sometimes been unfairly harsh, unnecessarily critical, and frankly wrong about your transition to the professional level? Because I need to be honest with you and everyone in this room, you've proven a lot of us wrong and you deserve better than some of the coverage you've received, especially from me." Clark's stunned reaction. For the first time in her professional career, perhaps the first time since her high school days, Caitlin Clark was genuinely at a loss for words. The player who had handled hostile road crowds at Michigan State, navigated intense Final Four pressure at Iowa, fielded countless challenging questions about her shooting selection and decision-making, and maintained composure through the intense scrutiny of being the most watched rookie in WNBA history, sat in complete silence. For what felt like an eternity, her mouth opened slightly then closed. She blinked several times, clearly processing not just the question but the unprecedented public acknowledgement from one of sports media's most prominent and influential voices. Her hands, which had been confidently gesturing throughout the press conference, now rested motionless on the podium. Wow, Clark finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The confidence that had carried her through the most pressure-packed moments of her basketball career temporarily absent. "Stephen A., I honestly don't know what to say to that. I mean, I literally don't have words right now." The room remained silent, everyone understanding they were witnessing something remarkable and unscripted in an era of carefully Managed media interactions. Clark's teammates including Kelsey Mitchell and Nalissa Smith, who had been preparing to leave for the team bus, stopped in the hallway and turned back toward the press room, sensing something significant was happening. Clark continued, finding her voice but still clearly emotional. You asking me that question, you being willing to say what you just said, it means more than you probably realize, because yeah, it has been tough. Sometimes the criticism, the constant comparisons to college stats, people questioning whether I could make the transition from the Big Ten to the WNBA, whether the hype was justified, whether I was ready for this level. She paused, taking a deep breath that seemed to center her. But you know what? That criticism also motivated me. It made me work harder in the gym. It made me study more film. It made me push myself to prove that I belong here, not just to the critics, but to myself, to my teammates, to the fans who believe in me. And hearing you acknowledge that now, hearing you be willing to reassess and admit that maybe some of the early criticism was premature. Stephen A. It's honestly overwhelming in the best possible way. Smith's follow-up revelation. Stephen A. Smith nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out what appeared to be handwritten notes, suggesting this wasn't a spontaneous moment but something he had been planning and preparing for. There's more I need to say, and I need to say it publicly because I've said other things publicly that weren't as fair or as informed as they should have been. I need to own up to specific examples. He began reading from his notes, his voice carrying the weight of genuine remorse. 3 months ago on First Take, I said that you were overhyped and that the WNBA excitement around you was manufactured by ESPN and sports media for television ratings. I said you needed to prove yourself over a full season before deserving the attention you were getting. I questioned whether you could handle the physicality and speed of professional basketball. I suggested that college success didn't guarantee professional success, which is true, but I said it in a way that was dismissive of what you had already accomplished. Clark's teammates Aaliyah Boston and Erica Wheeler had now gathered near the back of the room, clearly invested in this unexpected and emotionally charged moment that was unfolding before the entire basketball media establishment. But here's what I've learned since then, and here's what the numbers tell us. Smith continued, his tone growing stronger and more emphatic. You're averaging 19, 5 points and 4 assists per game as a rookie in your first professional season. For context, Diana Taurasi averaged 17, 0 points and 4 assists in her rookie year. Sue Bird averaged 14, 4 points and 9 assists. You're posting numbers that put you in historic company for first-year players. He looked directly at Clark, making eye contact in a way that felt personal rather than performative. But the numbers only tell part of the story. You've brought more mainstream attention to women's basketball than we've seen since the original marketing push around the league's inception. Attendance is up 48% league-wide when Indiana plays. On the road, television ratings have tripled for Fever Games. Merchandise sales featuring your jersey have exceeded expectations by 200%, but more than the commercial impact, it's how you carry yourself on and off the court, how you deflect individual praise to your teammates, how you handle adversity and criticism, how you've elevated not just your own game but the play of everyone around you. The emotion in Smith's voice was becoming more evident with each word. I was wrong about you, Caitlin. I was wrong to question your readiness. I was wrong to suggest the attention was undeserved. I was wrong to apply old standards to what you're doing for this sport, and I owe this league, and I owe my audience an apology for not recognizing sooner what everyone else could see, that you're not just a talented player making a successful transition, you're a transformational figure for women's professional basketball. The room's reaction, the press room erupted in a way that veteran basketball reporters had never experienced. Cameras flashed rapidly as photographers captured Clark's emotional response. Other journalists began frantically typing and recording, recognizing they were witnessing a moment that would define sports media conversations for months to come. Holly Rowe, who had covered countless emotional moments throughout her distinguished ESPN career, was visibly moved, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while continuing to take notes. Adrian Wojciechowski, known for his composed demeanor while breaking major NBA news, was filming the exchange on his phone, understanding its historical significance. Sue Bird, who was in attendance as a special analyst for ESPN's coverage, stood up from her seat in the media section and began applauding. The gesture prompted others to join in, first the ESPN production crew, then other reporters, and finally Fever staff members who had gathered to witness the unprecedented exchange. Aaliyah Boston walked over to the podium and put her hand on Clark's shoulder in a show of support and solidarity. The gesture seemed to ground Clark, who was still processing the surreal nature of what was happening in front of dozens of cameras and reporters. Stephen A. Clark said, her voice now stronger and more composed. You don't owe me an apology. Sports media is supposed to be critical, it's supposed to hold us accountable, it's supposed to ask tough questions and demand that we prove ourselves at the highest level. What matters to me, what really matters, is that you're willing to reassess and be honest about When the evidence changes your perspective, that takes courage and that takes integrity. She looked around the room at the other reporters, many of whom had covered her critically during her early professional struggles, and honestly the criticism made me better. It made me hungrier. It made me more determined to prove not just to you, not just to the fans, but to myself that I belonged here, that I could contribute to winning basketball at this level, that the transition from college to professional basketball was something I could handle and eventually master. The deeper conversation, what happened next, transformed a routine post-game press conference into something resembling a symposium on sports journalism, athlete development, and the unique pressures facing women's professional basketball in an era of unprecedented growth and mainstream attention. Adrian Wojciechowski, who had been quietly observing the emotional exchange while documenting it for social media, raised his hand to continue the conversation. Caitlin, building on what Stephen A. said about reassessing coverage, how do you think the media approach to women's basketball has evolved since you entered the league, and what changes would you like to see moving forward? Clark considered the question carefully, taking time to formulate a thoughtful response that acknowledged both progress and areas for continued improvement. I think it's gotten significantly more attention, which is obviously fantastic for the sport, for young girls who want to see professional pathways, and for the incredible athletes who have been building this league for decades. But with more attention comes more scrutiny, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if it's fair and informed scrutiny. She glanced at Smith, who was still standing and listening intently. What I appreciate about Stephen A.'s honesty today is that it demonstrates growth and willingness to learn. It shows that covering women's sports effectively isn't just about applying the same templates and expectations we use for men's sports. We're building something different here, something special, something that requires understanding the unique challenges and opportunities that come with being a women's professional basketball player. In 2025, Rebecca Lobo, covering the game for ESPN and bringing her perspective as both a former player and veteran broadcaster, joined the conversation. Caitlin, you mentioned motivation from criticism. Can you talk more specifically about how you've handled the pressure of essentially being the face of what many are calling a WNBA renaissance? That's the thing. Clark responded, her confidence now fully restored and her thoughts clearly organized. I never set out to be the face of anything. The turning point moment. Stephen A. Smith then did something that surprised everyone. Even more than his initial public apology and reassessment, he sat back down, reached into his jacket pocket again, and pulled out a small piece of paper that appeared to be folded multiple times, suggesting it had been carried around for some time. Caitlin, there's one more thing, and this is the most important part of what I wanted to say today. My daughter Maya is 12 years old, and she plays basketball for her middle school team in New York. She's been following your career since your junior year at Iowa, and she asked me to give you something if I ever had the chance to meet you. He stood up and walked toward the podium, extending the folded paper toward Clark. She wrote you a letter several months ago, right around the time I was being critical of your professional transition. And she made me promise to give it to you if I ever met you in person. I've been carrying it with me to games, waiting for the right moment. Clark accepted the letter with obvious curiosity and genuine appreciation. She unfolded the paper carefully, as if understanding that whatever was written there had significance beyond typical fan mail. As she began reading silently, her expression changed dramatically from curiosity to surprise to genuine emotion. Her eyes widened, then narrowed as she focused on specific words. A smile spread across her face, followed by what appeared to be the beginning of tears. Would you mind if I read part of this out loud? Clark asked Smith, who nodded enthusiastically. I think it says something important that everyone should hear. She cleared her throat and began reading in a voice that carried both amusement and genuine emotion. Dear Caitlin Clark, she began, my name is Maya Smith and I am 12 years old. My dad is Stephen A. Smith and he talks about basketball on TV. Sometimes he says mean things about athletes, but I think you're amazing and I think he's wrong about you. Most of the time the room burst into laughter, including Stephen A. Smith, who was shaking his head with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Clark continued reading, you make me want to practice my three-pointers every single day after school. You make me believe that girls can be tough and competitive and still be ourselves. You show me that it's okay to be confident and to work hard for your dreams. Thank you for being someone I can look up to. P.S. My dad doesn't know as much about basketball as he thinks he does, but don't tell him I said that. Love, Maya Smith. The room erupted in laughter again, this time even louder, with several reporters applauding both the letter and Mia's honest assessment of her father's basketball knowledge. Mia's absolutely not wrong about that last part, Stephen A. Smith said, causing another wave of laughter and cementing the moment as one of genuine humor and human connection rather than typical sports media drama.